Welcome everyone, today I have another guide for Diablo 4. Now in case you guys are wondering like me, what are some of the status effects in Diablo 4 and what do they mean? Like what happens when you berserk, what happens when you overpower, what happens when you slow, what happens when enemies are injured? Well, here we have all the status effect, over 20 status effect over here. We'll go through them and talk about briefly about the skills and also classes. Because, in some of my videos, I realized that I was not able to understand some of those. And, especially notes about how to break out of crowd control against bosses and also elites. So let's go through this together in this video and we get a better understanding of all the status effect in Diablo 4 for better skill building and also better talent tree. Now starting with alphabet, we start with barrier. What can be finding some of the barriers and also skills in even the Codex of Power. So over here you can see the aspect of deflecting barrier. When barrier is activated, there's chance to ignore distant damage. There's also other ones that give us different barriers. So notice over here we get a magical bubble with different barriers. So it's quite important to know those. Basically for barrier, it absorbs damage from all sources for a certain amount. And the barrier source other than the Codex will be coming from barrier and also sources with iron skin and also iron armor. And there are some codex that is built around this. So do keep in mind guys, if you're going for the codex and also different things, make sure you know the terms. The next one is berserk. Berserk is mainly for the barbarian. Barbarian have a few seconds of berserk when casting certain skills or hitting enemies. And also he can gain berserk from ultimate Wrath of Berserker. The barbarian will deal 25% more damage and 30% movement speed up to 5 seconds. So keep in mind of that, and I do believe there are even more buffs with Wrath of Berserker. Next term is bleeding. As for bleeding, when enemies suffer bleeding damage, they take a percentage of your weapon's damage over time. And for the barbarian, I believe it's about 5 seconds. Yeah, if I believe correctly for the rend, it's about 5 seconds. And they take over 100% of the bleeding damage. So what I'll do is I'll quickly show you guys over here. So I'm pretty familiar with the barbarian now. You can see that rend, they take 101% bleeding damage at least. So this is really nice. And as we keep going, next one is burning. For the term burning, it is enemies suffering damage over time, and this is the source for sources, and likely this is going to be the fire build for the sources. Now very soon I'll go into the sources build, and likely I'll do 3 build for all of the elements, for each of them. The next key term is going to be chilled. Enemies that are chilled have reduced movement speed. Enemies that are repetitively chilled will be frozen. Now we'll look at frozen very soon, so let's jump to frozen quickly. So for frozen, enemies who are frozen cannot attack or move. It's pretty much similar to stun. Enemies who are repetitively chilled are frozen. So what you want to do is, you want to keep constantly applying chill to the enemy. And as for the sources, there's multiple ways to do so in the cold build. And it's very powerful in PvP, I believe. And as for the rogue, there is only one method of applying, it is a cold embedment. But I do believe with cold attacks, you can attack pretty frequently. So if you're going for chilled, you'll be going for frozen. And if you're going for frozen, you'll be going over here for some of the aspects that increases damage dealt to enemies, up to 40% when enemies frozen, stunned or knocked down, which is very good. The next key term we have is going to be for the sources, Lightning Spear for crackling energy. Now crackling energy periodically causes damage to nearby enemies when picked up. The next term is going to be for the rogue, for the smoke grenade. It is dazed. When enemies are dazed, they cannot attack or use skills, but they can still move. So the difference between dazed and also stunned is not that much. So when enemies are stunned, I believe they can't even move. But when enemies are dazed, they can't move, they can't attack, they can't use skills, but they can still move. The next term is quite interesting. This one is going to be fortify. So a lot of characters actually have stats and also different effects called fortify. So let me show you guys one of those on the barbarian tree over here. So for example, this one. So each time you take direct damage, gain 0.4% base life as fortify. So I was always wondering, what is fortify? Is it a shield? What is it? So basically for fortify, characters that are fortified take 10% less damage. You gain fortify when the amount of fortify exceeds your current life. Now what I do believe is, this could be in the form of a shield and this could be in the form of damage reduction. And having additional 10% damage reduction will be useful, especially when you're in the middle of the enemies. Now exactly how it works, so you have to be exceeding your current life. Let's say I'm on 50 life and my fortify is 55. So does that mean I'll take 10% less damage until my fortify dissipates below 50 or until it goes to 0? I'm not exactly sure, it doesn't clarify on this one. So if you guys do have more notes on fortify, do let me know. Now we talk about Frozen. This is when you repetitively chill enemies, and most of the source of Frozen are coming from the sources, and also one from the rogue. The next one is gonna be an important one. A lot of the characters, and I think I saw one for Necromancer, they want enemies to be healthy. When enemies are healthy, they're above 80% HP. This is when you just, doing damage to the enemy right away when you first meet them. And some of the skills will give you increased damage when enemies are healthy, while other skills will give you increased damage when enemies are injured. So let's come to injured for now, and let's have a look. Injured characters or injured enemies are when characters have less than 35% of the maximum HP. So one thing I did notice is on my previous one of the builds I actually made a small mistake. I thought injured is below 80%. So over here you can see the Barbarian passive, this particular passive, the Slaying Strike. If enemies are injured, you deal 23% more damage, but this is when enemies are under 35% HP. So it is quite important for us to understand the healthy part for 80% HP or greater, and also the injured part under the 35% HP. The next term we have is going to be immune. Characters that are immune cannot be damaged at all, and the negative effects are removed and also prevented. So this is like invulnerability. And I do believe we get a Paladin class or Priest class in the future, they might have this as well. So currently, I believe most of the sources are coming from the sources, and it's like like a safety kit. And basically, you take no damage, you can dodge a massive skill from the boss, and you remove all the debuffs, which is very important. Now, I do believe there's another way to remove debuffs, which we'll have a look at very soon. This will be about having Unstoppable. Getting Unstoppable means you can remove the debuffs and become immune to debuffs, and also crowd control. Now, the next term we have is Knockback. Almost all of the classes will have knockback. Actually, only 2 of the classes thought dissolved. So 2 of the classes, Barbarian and also the Druid, the melee classes, that is like kind of barbaric and strong, powerful, have knockback. Knockback is when you push enemies away, and while pushing them, you will be able to prevent them from taking actions. I believe if you hit them onto something, there's additional effect as well. So this is coming from the Barbarian tree, which they have the charge and also kick. And over here, you can see enemies who are knocked into a terrain takes additional 57% damage and also are stunned for 3 seconds. So while you're knocking back enemies, you can also deal additional damage to them and also apply different debuffs. And as knowing that there's also there's also basically aspects that gives you additional damage when enemies are stunned or knocked down. There's things that's really good. So here, if you stun the enemies, you can do 30% more damage and also 40% more damage with offensive aspects. The next term we have over here is going to be Overpower. Well, I was very confused about Overpower, and I think this clarifies a little bit, but not fully. So for Overpower, it seems like Overpower deals additional damage based on the sum of your life and also Fortified life. Remember we talked about Fortify, this skills that gives you Fortify, and when you have Fortify over your HP, you gain 10% damage reduction. And as for this one, it plus your life and Fortify life and deals this in terms of damage, I believe. So I'll give you an example of the skills that is talking about for the Overpower. So here there's a Barbarian passive. When using a two-handed weapon, your Overpower deals more damage. And oh my gosh, you actually have the points over here. I believe, no, I have to pick here. There you go. So here is you gain 45% more Overpower damage when using a two-handed weapon. And this is a combination of your HP and also fortified HP. So this is like a tank. When you're very tanky, like for the Barbarian or the Druid, the fortified can be very powerful. And this also comes in terms of the maximal HP pool and also having more fortified together to deal more overpower damage. The next term we have is going to be pulled. Enemies that are pulled inwards towards the caster into melee range. And this is for the Barbarian. Usually you group of enemies together for this. And overpower additional damage to the south. Oh, this is, I think they had the actual line over here. The next one we have is slow. A lot of skills and also effects to apply slow, and you can deal additional damage to slowed enemies. So for example, this particular perk for No Mercy, for the Barbarian, when you deal 13% more damage to immobilize, stun or slowed enemies. And this means when enemies are slowed, you deal more damage. And there's a lot of effect from Barbarian that slows enemies when they're bleeding. So it's really good for the bleeding build. The next one we have is going to be stealth. Most of the stealths are coming from the rogue class, and it says when you are stealth, enemies can't hit you directly, but they can still hit you with AoE damage. And when the character that is stealth attacks or takes damage, the stealth is removed. So I have heard in beta the stealth is not as strong for rogues. We're yet to discover. We're going to test this out. The next term we have is going to be stunned. Now this one, almost all of the characters will have a source of stun. You can see 4 sources of stun from Barbarian, 3 sources from the Druid and Rogue, and also sources. Now, because they are perks we mentioned earlier that provide us with additional damage when enemies are stunned, over here and also over here for the 40 and also the 30% additional damage. So stun is going to be quite interesting and also essential for certain builds. And if you can stun enemies, they won't be attacking, they won't be casting spells, and this gives you both offense and also defense. And over here, the next term is going to be Taunt. This is straightforward. Enemies are forced to attack the caster who casts Taunt for a few seconds. And for the Barbarian, this is coming from the Taunting shot as well. So Barbarian can be a really good tank in a party with your friends. And next word we have is going to be Unstoppable. Unstoppable is a very interesting term, and almost every class wants Unstoppable. So what Unstoppable does is, you cannot be controlled by, impairing effects like slow, freeze, or other debuffs. And also there's also additional notes about breaking out of crowd control. So here you can see some of the bosses in Diablo 4, they have crowd control, even including freeze and also blind, stun. And when those happens and those debuffs are onto your character, you can either wait for those timers to expire, or you can trigger the Unstoppable status. When you trigger unstoppable status, you'll immediately break all of the debuffs, and this will ensure you to not take too much of its damage. And one of the classic examples is going to be the Barbarian's Rallying Cry. So for the Barbarian, this one's very interesting. I'll come over here and show you guys. The Rallying Cry itself, the upgrade for the Rallying Cry will make Unstoppable. So when the Barbarian shouts for the Rallying Cry, everyone will gain the additional movement speed, resource regeneration, and also Unstoppable. This is quite nice. And also over here we can see that as for the Barbarian of the Codex, there's also Iron Skin can become Unstoppable. So depending on the source of Unstoppable, you can be more defensive and also more controlling as to when you get controlled and how to get out of it. And this can be very good for the PvP, because a lot of characters will have slows and stuns and freezes, right? So this is going to be very important for both PvE and also PvP. And finally, we have the term Vulnerable. Now Vulnerable seems very interesting, and there's a lot of sorts of Vulnerable. So I've seen with Barbarians, there's multiple sorts of Vulnerable as well. There's Druid, Rogue, and also Sources. I'll give you guys the example for the Barbarian over here for the source of Vulnerable. So you can see here Barbarian, when the Bubble Flay hits enemies, there's a percentage of chance of giving enemy vulnerable, and doubles the effect when you're using two-handed weapon. And there's also other skills which gives you more effects of vulnerable. And over here, when the Barbarian use Weapon Master skills followed by a core skill, you can apply up to, I believe you can apply up to 4 seconds or 4.5 seconds of vulnerable, and this will increase the enemy's damage taken by 20%. So what that means is, if you party up with party members, if you continuously debuff vulnerable, everyone will enjoy increase of damage. And some skills even do more damage when enemies are vulnerable. So let me show you guys the example for this one. So for example, the Cutting to the Bone for the bleeding build for the Barbarian. When enemies are vulnerable, you deal 18% more bleeding effect and also more damage. And this is going to be very powerful. So 20% plus another 18% of additional damage. Now, because we're doing a key terms video, I thought I'd also include the primary stats and also the primary effects for different classes. So currently, we don't have all of the primary stats for all the classes. We only have Barbarian, Sorceress, and also Rogue. I'm sure most of you guys have seen this. If you haven't, definitely check it out, and I'll give you guys the link for this. So basically, for the Barbarian, you want Strength and also Dexterity. For Sorceress, you want Intelligence. For Rogue, you want Dexterity. For primary stats. But for Barbarian, you just want Strength for the damage and more critical, maybe about 3-1 or even 4-1. So in terms of allocation, we'll talk about this more in details as well, and also the effects of getting those stats. So getting Strength means more armor, getting Intelligence means more all resistance, Willpower for the healing received, and also Dexterity for the chance to dodge attack. Because we're going for key terms, right? So I add this one in the video as well for you guys. Now, hopefully you guys found this video helpful. Because there's a lot of terms, I thought I'd just do a summary video for this one. And this also, teaches myself and also helps me to understand the game a little more. So if you have any questions or if you have any clarifications, let me know in the comments below, guys. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Now, before you go, and if you guys didn't know, we have a new YouTube channel. So I just started a YouTube channel with my girlfriend yesterday, and you can see this is only 12 hours old, this YouTube channel. And if you guys haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe and check out the behind the scenes and also fun clips and also more stories about us. And then you get to know me a little more personally instead of just reading the news and also the games, right? So I want to share a little bit more with you guys. So make sure you check this channel out if you're interested about Matt and also Uni. She's really funny too, and she's really shy. So I want to give her a surprise and do a shout out for the new channel to get some subscribers. Thank you guys. I'll see you guys next time.